Leah, thank you so much for joining us here on Ripstop on the Record.
Hi, well, thanks for having me. Very excited.
Of course, you are one of 9 of our adventure sponsors, and obviously this is not our first adventure sponsor recording and not our last. We have one more after you, but you're near the end. And we are really looking forward to talk to you. I don't want to divulge too much to give away any of the cool things that you've been working on. But before we get started, why don't you introduce yourself, who you are and where you live?
Yep, I can do that. Yeah, so I am Leah, as you might hear, from Germany, but have been living in Switzerland for the past couple of years. Yeah, I like to make my own gear sometimes.
Leah, I feel like the way you do DIY is different from a lot of other people that we talk to. And I don't know if that's just because of your experience with being outdoors and DIY in general, but this is not a question that we gave you. So I'm already throwing a loop for you, but what does DIY mean to you? Like when you make your own gear, we'll talk about all the stuff that you did later, but you went above and beyond what people we even expected you to do. You took on a big trip, you do a lot of cool work. How does DIY fit back into that? Or why did you even just what does it mean to you?
I don't know. I think I just have this curiosity where I just want to see if I can make something. And I got this weird idea in my head. And then I'm just okay, I think I'm going to go for it. And then see how it turns out. And 90% of the time, it's really messy and chaotic. But I think it just is you got to fail all these times to actually come up with something reasonable in the end. And I think, I think it's most of it is just me trying to, or wondering, is oh yeah, I wonder how this is done. And then trying to look into it. And it's oh, maybe I can do it myself. Kind of sounds exciting. And then try to do it. Yeah.
Would you consider yourself a curious person outside of DIY?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a scientist, so I think naturally, yeah, I tend to be pretty curious and try to understand things. So
Yeah. So the question I was supposed to ask you, and thank you for going away, is what do you do? What do you do vocationally? You mentioned you're a scientist, but what type? And then what do you like to do recreationally? What was your adventure on?
Yes, so yeah, I am a scientist. I work in a research institute here in Zurich in Switzerland, where we research glaciers. So very cool job. No yeah, and so that's how I make my money most of the time. And so yeah, I've studied geophysics. I'm a bit more on the physics sides of that. And yeah, on the weekends, since I'm in Switzerland and we have those big mountains called the Alps here, I like being in the mountains. And yeah, I do hiking, but yeah, also very easy, great mountaineering, or just in the winter some ski touring, although I'm really bad at it, just still like to do it. And I think that sums it up. I don't really have any other hobbies than mountains, I think. And
Got
yeah,
it. So
making gear to go to the mountains.
Got it. So you're smarter than all of us, is what you're saying.
Not sure about that.
Your job does sound very cool, literally or figuratively.
Niche knowledge. So
yeah, that is fascinating. Well,
How did you get into that real quick? How did you get into wanting to be a scientist and specifically researching glaciers? Because I think you're probably the first person we've talked to that does that.
I mean, yeah, I always thought science is really cool, and I love physics for as long as I could think. So yeah, I ended up studying geophysics or physics of the earth. And then for my master's, I came to Switzerland and I saw that they were doing all this glacier and polar research and thought it's the coolest thing. But also thought it's only super badass people do that kind of stuff. But then I don't know, I just started working in that field. And I mean, I finished my studies by now, but I'm just still continue working there. And yeah, I mean, it's some smart people working there, but it's also normal people that have never been on a glacier before actually started studying them. So yeah.
I find that really fascinating. I know that you also recently did a public speaking event. I didn't know if you wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah, I guess we could. Yeah, there was an event where I spoke about one of the long distance hikes that I did, which was a hike in the Caucasus, which is like this, I don't know, it's like between like Russia and Iran, basically. The region is like big mountain range, and yeah, I try to true hike on a trail that doesn't exist yet, the Trans-Caucasian Trail, and there was only one person before me that tried to do it, and so yeah, it was a bit of a different kind of true hike and adventure. And yeah, I spoke about this experience on like a adventure festival thingy in Switzerland a couple of weeks ago, which was really fun because I never did anything like that before, and super nice. Yeah,
That's so fascinating. You're one of the first people to do a trail. Not many people get to say that.
yeah. I mean, there's probably like a few other people that do the first time because it like changes so much, and yeah, but it was definitely like a absolutely intense but also great experience.
Awesome. So let's hop in to your adventure and what you did, and then we'll get into all of the cool things that you made. But tell us what your adventure was, all the details that people love to hear. So, you know, distance, time of year, location, all that jazz.
All that, yeah. So I mean, originally I had planned to hike across the Swiss Alps on my 4-week holiday this summer, which didn't happen because of several reasons. Mostly it was some work-related stuff and me, yeah, having some like health issues in the past year. So I was just like not fit enough to really like do a long trip and didn't have the time. So full disclosure, it was only like 2 weeks in the end, and I actually didn't hike the Swiss Alps. I like hiked on the Swiss Alps for like a week, and then I just went to Germany for like another 2 weeks and hiked there. But in the end, it was still hiking. So yeah, I didn't really have this like one big trip that I had initially like had planned to do, which is a bit sad, but hopefully that will happen some other time. Yeah, but I mean, I took my gear that I made out on like lots of like weekend or longer than weekend hikes and this like 3-week hike in the summer. And so yeah, it was a total, I think, roughly a week in the Swiss Alps. Mostly I joined my boyfriend, who was actually, because he was lucky, he had time, and yeah, he was fit to do actually like a traverse of the full Alps, not only Switzerland, but like all the countries, which was like about 2,000 kilometers. Actually, I don't know how long that thing was, but yeah, it was like, and not the classical alpine traverse, but more like a mountaineering route, also like a mixture of like simpler mountaineering and some like high routes, scrambling, pretty intense. So yeah, I joined him for a couple of days on this trip, which was in like Ticino, in like the Italian speaking part of Switzerland. And then yeah, after that I went back to Germany to kind of resume a route I did last year, so last winter, I think pretty much a year ago. Yeah, I like walked from Zurich in Switzerland, where I live now, to my hometown in Germany, which is about 400 kilometers north of here, because there was this lockdown and you couldn't really go anywhere else. So I just like walked through the winter, and I kind of thought, oh, it would be fun to just like continue this walk. So just for my hometown, like walk even further north. So yeah, and that's what I did in the summer. I initially wanted to walk to Cologne. I mean, I feel like probably all those names of places don't really say anyone anything. If you're funny, yes. But yeah, so I tried to like walk from my hometown to like another place I like used to live a couple of years ago. And yeah, it's like in the western part of Germany, it's quite like rural, and there's lots of like, not like really super big mountains, but lots of forests and hills, and it's just like a really lovely area to go walking.
Awesome. So what time of year or what month did you spend doing the week in the Swiss Alps? And then what month did you spend doing your route that you resumed in Germany?
There was, I think, end of July and August, if I'm not mistaken. It's already been so long. Yeah, so yeah, classic summer, end of summer hike.
Perfect. I'm sure the summer in the Swiss Alps is a little different than the summer in North Carolina. So we're excited to hear about all of the gear that you made and that you brought with you for this trip. I know that Jameson and I have been stalking your Instagram hard just since this whole thing started earlier this year. And I feel like I know you because I love your Instagram and all your posts, and you're just very personable. So that's just a plug for anyone to go follow Leah there. But and to get more information and pictures on what we are about to talk about, because you've done a great job of organically documenting your entire process. And it's not always been pretty, like you said. It's been very real and just an honest process of everything that you made. So we can kind of hop into that now.
Yeah. Tell us about what you made with the sponsorship.
Yeah, so what I made with the sponsorship, I think the first thing I made was to make my own backpack, with the special feature of it being that I wanted to use like the OutdoorINK custom print function stuff. And so yeah, I made like a frameless, I guess something around 35-40 liter backpack, which has a print of a satellite image of the Swiss Alps on it, where you can has like a false color scheme, so it's pretty colorful, and you can see like the glaciers that are like popping out in like a pretty bright yellow. So that's a bit of my like glaciologist take on the thing. And yeah, so that was really fun to make. So it's made from like the printed X-PAC.
You did say it was really fun to make, but I also know from watching your stories that you took every stitch out of your backpack and then you redid it again. So
yeah, like 3 times roughly.
So was it really fun to make, or you just like a really persistent? No one loves taking stitches out. You did it multiple times to take apart your backpack to put it back together.
Yeah, it was definitely learning. Yeah, now I just like, I've been using the backpack like as it is for like quite a while now, and I just love it and it's great. But yeah, now that I think back, like what it looked like when I made it in like April, yeah, it was a bit of a disaster at first. I think it turned out like super wonky, and like one pedal was way too big. And I think the shoulder straps, in the end, I made like 4 or 5 complete sets of shoulder straps because I just like couldn't get them right. And then I had them like attached at like a slightly like at a wrong angle, and it just like it's driving me mad. I took them like a bunch of like weekend test hikes. It's like, oh no, it's still not right. And so yeah, and then I think the mesh pockets I replaced completely. Oh yeah. So yeah, the backpack actually went through quite a few iterations before I like settled on a design I have now. But I think yeah, making my own gear definitely taught me to like be persistent with the
What was your sewing experience going into the adventure sponsorship? Because we felt like you showed the skills that you were going to make stuff. We weren't really worried about you completing the project, but it is interesting to hear about people. A lot of people like, I sewed a little bit in high school, and like I do like to work with my hands, but I haven't done it since. Were you really familiar with a sewing machine, or is this totally new?
Yeah, I was more of like I think as a like kid, my mom taught me like really the basics of like how to use a sewing machine, so like she never has to like seam anything for me the rest of her life. And then yeah, I really haven't like done it ever since, and I hated doing it because my mom had like this really old shit sewing machine that just like as soon as you use it, like all the thread just gets like tangled up, and it's like a nightmare to even just make the simplest things. But then yeah, last year during COVID lockdown, just had a lot of time at hand. Yeah, so I think the first thing I started making was just like I upcycled like an old pair of like hiking pants and I think some like dry bag or some old dry bag, whatever, into some ultralight backpack that I made. And it actually like turned out reasonably fine, and it was really fun to make. And then I don't know, I was kind of hooked after this and just like kept doing more and more. So like yeah, within like the last I think like a year ago pretty much, I like started making some things. I had made like one backpack, a tent, and I tried to make a jacket, which wasn't very successful. But yeah, it was but I pretty much went from like knowing how to like make one straight seam to, okay, I think that's good enough to try and make a backpack.
I just want to chime in because a lot of people start making their own gear and they start out with like a ZPP kit. They start out with like a stuff sack or a wallet. And I have some of your notes pulled up from when you applied to your venture sponsorship, and you said you only and you submitted this in February, obviously, but you said you only very recently got into making gear. But since then, you made a puffy jacket. You had made, and that you were also designing your own tent. And I was like, for someone who just recently got into MYOG like that, you didn't just like dip your toe in, girl. You like fully jumped in the pool of making your own gear, and I appreciate that. You have like a drive. Everything you say is so casual. You're like, oh, I started it a year ago, but you just jumped into the deep end.
Yeah, but I think it's more, especially like the tent making and stuff. I think I approach it more from like the engineering side of things, or like maybe I'm like really, or like I really enjoy making all the like technical bits before, but then like actually like the like executing like to make a straight seam, like that's definitely nothing I'm really good at. But everything around it I enjoy making. So and I think other people come from the other side where they like really have the sewing skills, but don't really like have the like engineering and like know what like technical features you want and how to achieve them. So
I find that making gear is so much more exciting than just sewing. And I think you probably feel the same based on what you were saying. Or like when your mom made you do, you're like, I don't want to do this. You know, if my wife asks me like hem the curtains, I'm like, I don't really want to do that. Yeah. The sewing part's not really the fun part, you know, like it's the designing
exactly.
and then the using, but the in-between is kind of trash.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned that you were taught how to sew by your mom on a pretty old machine. And that didn't seem like you were loving that experience too much, but what machine are you working on now? Because that's a question a lot of people ask. They see the gear that's being made, your awesome backpacks, your Dyneema shelter that we'll also get into, and they think, oh, I can't make that because I just have an at-home machine. But what machine did you use to create all of your projects on?
A really old at-home machine is what I'm using. So like what the first tent I did and the stuff I did like last year, I did on my mom's also machine, which was an absolute nightmare. And then beginning of this year, I just purchased like my own like Craigslist second-handed, at least, I don't know, 30-year-old domestic sewing machine for like $100. And that thing was like turned out to be really amazing. It's like a Prada Star, I forgot the other specifications, but I love it. It's great. And the only thing it's like struggling with is like super heavy duty applications, obviously, because it's just like a quiet, fine domestic machine. But yeah, so I actually ended up buying a Singer heavy duty like 2 months ago, but absolutely hate it. It like doesn't work at all for me. So
Oh, no.
I really regret getting it. So if anyone needs a second-handed, barely used Singer heavy duty, let me know.
Really, I love hearing that from you because, like I said, a lot of people see gear from other people or that we post or wherever they're researching making their own gear, and they think, oh, I can't make my own gear because I don't have $1,000 to shell out on a Juki or whatever. And you're like, nah, I just went on Craigslist and got another 30-year-old machine and it was $100. And that's just like, for everyone listening who has had that one thing that's been holding them back of not having the best machine or right machine, is that there is no best machine or right machine. It's like what Jameson has always said, just the machine that you can find, and you were resourceful and went through Craigslist. So that is awesome. Props to you. And then I think it's funny too that you say you hate the Singer HD, because that's the one that I think we recommend to people the most, and that our users use the most.
That's like the most popular machine ever. So it's hilarious because like I know it's a great machine, but it's funny to me that you had a bad experience with it still, just because it happens. Like you can't control it.
I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with me or with machine or why I hate it, but it just seems so like flimsy compared to my like. I mean, it costs like 3 times as much as my Craigslist machine, but like it actually seems to be like much like lower quality than the Craigslist machine.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I was just lucky with like the like Prada machine that I had before.
Yeah, that's too funny.
We got a little
But-
bit away from the projects that you were making, so we can hop back into that or just wherever you want to take the conversation. But you mentioned the frameless backpack and the custom print that you did. Let's talk a little bit more about that, and then we can hop into the other things. And then the reason I'm bringing this up is because another thing that you wrote in your adventure sponsorship application was one of the reasons you wanted to make your own gear was because it was hard to find things in the cottage company industry or the outdoor industry in general that gear specifically made for women. And I think you did a lot of testing and things for your pack to specifically fit you because you're a lady. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about that and then get more details as far as like what fabric you printed on and anything else you wanted to share about your backpack that you took apart 3 times that you now love.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, as you said, like, I mean, going through like 5 iterations of shoulder straps kind of shows that I like really wanted to like get it like fit right to me. But yeah, I mean, especially like in Europe, I mean, there's not much of a like cottage gear industry at all, but even like from all the like US companies. And I mean, yeah, I did some like tour hike in the US, so I like know the market a little bit there as well. And yeah, I've really been struggling to like find gear that like fits me. And especially, I think the most annoying part I personally found were like shoulder straps on backpacks, because there's so many like great like ultralight backpacks and like, oh, they look cool, but I like try them on, and I mean, I'm not like super curvy or super skinny for women, so I think I'm still like fairly like average like square shaped body, like, or square shaped like shoulders, but I don't know, just like the shoulder straps, like they never really fit. Either were like way too wide or were like pressing on my collarbones, were like quite, I guess, standing out quite a bit. So yeah, just like, I don't know, I got like really angry and really annoyed, and like a lot of the companies, yeah, they just like don't make them. It's like, oh yeah, it's unisex, but obviously it's like made to like fit a male shoulders. Or like the problem with the what do you call it in English? The chest strap, or
the sternum strap.
chest
Yeah.
strap.
the sternum strap. Yeah.
So for people
That's,
listening and other women that are making their own packs, you said you went through the 5 iterations of making those shoulder straps fit right. So in the end, what did you find was the tweak or the thing that you had to do that last 5th time for it to fit right?
I think, yeah, trying to like get the angle right. So like I definitely wanted to a bit more angle, whereas like most of the like male like shoulder straps are like attached in like a like horizontal line. And yeah, I experiment a lot with like different like curvatures, because there's always like the, oh yeah, I have like the S-shaped shoulder strap or the J-shaped ones, or I don't know what. And yeah, I like experimented with like all kinds of like different like curvatures and shapes to just like get one that fits me. And I think especially like, yeah, like trying to find one that like doesn't cut in my collarbone, that took a bit of time. And it actually ended up being like fairly straight, but not like perfectly straight, so just like curved in like the one right spot. And also I think one thing that really helped me was to like not make them like super wide and super bulky, because often everyone just like advertising like, oh yeah, like super nicely cushioned shoulder straps and like super thickly padded. And that's, I don't know, for me personally, I like find it horrible. Like it really doesn't fit me. I had like, I don't want to drop any names here of big companies, but I had another like I had some like cottage gear like backpack just before that, and it was just like a shoulder strap was so wide it just didn't fit at all. So I ended up like cutting them like down to like half the width and like shaping them a little bit, and that made it a little bit better, but still wasn't perfect. So there was a bit of my like motivation to like really see what it needs to like make that fit.
Yeah, I think as a woman and any other ladies that are listening to this, which there aren't many of us in the MYOG world, unfortunately, which is always a surprise, because I think 75% of our customers are men, and then we just get that one little quarter that are women. So I know that we do have ladies that are listening to that podcast, and I know that they are going to relate and be on the other side of this listening, being like, yes, that is the struggle that we've been dealing with, is that these packs are, like you said, made straight across and made mostly for men, and like have these super big bulky straps that end up like rubbing. I know I always get like weird bruises here after a backpacking trip. That's always really fun. So I love that you really spent the time doing the testing and unstitching it, restitching it, and doing all these iterations to try to find that shoulder strap exactly right. And then I'm just jealous that I don't have one of your packs, because that's my biggest complaint too. Every time I go backpacking, it's that and then the hip belt. So
the hip belt. I mean, I made like a fairly minimalistic hip belt, so like it wasn't quite as much of an impact. But yeah, it's the hip belt is the other thing, and I feel like that is not like 100% sorted out yet. So I think I need a few more like iterations for the next backpacks.
Could you touch on a little bit more about the straps that you made? Because that is, although our demographic is too lopsided, I do think it is really like one of the biggest selling points of DIY, that you can make gear that actually fits you. So if you don't mind sharing your kind of your patented technology, if you will, for other people and other women that want to make packs that fit them better. So you started out with the angle connecting the straps to the pack being a bit more dramatic, right? Where I think normally the angle is like 5 degrees or something, but you took that a little bit more angled. Is that right?
Yeah, angle it a little bit more, and I also like made them like closer together, because often they attach like too far out, so like the straps just end up like sliding off the shoulders. And so yeah, they're like really like sitting in the right place, but then still at the same time I want them to like curve out so they don't like grab on my collarbones. So I think like getting that like curve right here was probably like the hardest bit, at least for me. And then
stronger angle closer to the neck, and then it bowed out around your neck but over your collarbones, and then from there you said the strap was fairly almost kind of straight down going across your torso without a super strong in curve. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of made them, I attached them like pretty high up, so like where they were attached to the back panel at the lower end, it wasn't like super far down, whereas like it would just like go over my breast. So like, you know, when you have it like go over the shoulders, it like kind of like ends up going like under my armpit, fairly high up. So yeah, that helped for me. I mean, again, I feel like I want to make like another 5 iterations and try with like different like shapes. I've got some like girlfriends I'm already like putting out like models for them to test.
That's awesome. So I don't want to get into this too much, not because it's not a wonderful conversation, but it's just it's a much broader conversation. But besides your standard dose of kind of misogyny in the world in general, why do you think more people, especially in cottage vendors, don't make more specific gear? Because I'm sure it's possibly more women would get into the backcountry if they had gear that actually worked for them. I'm sure that's a big barrier, where one, it's expensive for sure, but a lot of people, if it's not comfortable, you're not going to want to do it again. So we're not encouraging more women to get outside if they're having a bad time.
Yeah, I really don't know why that is. I mean, I feel like most of the like, you know, big companies like, I don't know, like the Osprey or whatever, or Deuter or Gregory, I think they're big in the US too. No, they all make like female designed backpacks, and I mean, Osprey actually makes like really nicely fitting backpacks. So I think in like for like the broader like backpacking audience, that's like totally fine, and there definitely is enough of a market. But I think mostly like the ultralight gear that's aimed at like true hiking and that kind of adventures, there's I don't know what percentages, if there's more male true hikers or like more ultralight male true hikers. I feel like they probably are from my experience. So I think that's mostly like the market where there's like a lack of female. Yeah, you want to say something?
I think also too, there are very few women-owned companies who are making gear specifically for women. Yes, there are women who are designing clothing for women. And there's you know, a very select handful of those, but off of the list of cottage companies, obviously not the bigger ones, like not anything you would find in REI. So Osprey obviously makes women's packs, but when we break it down to cottage companies, there are, from my knowledge, not any cottage company that is owned by a woman, where a woman is making packs for other women. And if someone is out there listening and you feel inspired by what we're saying, we're telling you that you could probably quit your job in a year and be making packs full time, because there are tons of women's Facebook groups. And I know that you do a lot with women in the backcountry, connecting them and things like that. So yeah, if you're hearing this and you're like, I'm going to be that person that's going to be the person to start this women's backpack revolution and then Cottage Company, like, you will not be bored. I think a lot of people are looking for that. And that's why a lot of women are making their own packs, like you said, because you just needed to take that strap adjustment, make it a little thinner, make it angled the right way. And then that was your trick, when all these other men who are doing Cottage Companies they're just making packs for their guy friends. Yeah. And then it's just like, still doesn't fit right. So I love that you can relate to that so much. Especially being one of the only girls on the team and one of the only girls at Ripstop. It's like really making my heart so full right now.
Oh, well, that's really nice to hear. But yeah, I'll let you know if I have like a few more prototypes to run through, and then maybe we can nice to hear too. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit hard being in Europe, because I mean, there just generally is like not like an ultralight gear market at all, and then so having like a female ultralight gear market would be like even smaller or even like harder. But yeah, like in the US, I mean, just
do you have any plans on, I know a lot of people who make their own gear will help, give their design or template or sell it to other people. Do you have any plans to really perfect your women's pack and to share your pattern with others?
Don't really have a plan yet, because I mean, so far it's not like a proper pattern. It's just like, I mean, I just made it. I would actually like have to go back and like make a pattern from a backpack that I made, like going in reverse. But yeah, I mean, eventually, if it's like something that I'm like really settled on, it's like I feel like it fits, then yeah, I could definitely imagine like making a pattern from it and spreading it. I mean, yeah, but I never really make patterns. I just like throw some things on a sheet of paper and then just go for it. So,
yeah, that was going to be my next question. If you're not going off of patterns, what is your process for making a pack from scratch? Are you doing it out of Tyvek? Are you sewing it out of a cheap cotton material to get to the dimensions right? If you're just freehanding everything, what is your process like for that?
Most of the time I just actually like I draw something on a piece of paper with like the rough dimensions, and I look at the backpacks that I've got and like what I like about them, what I don't like about them. I mean, by now I've like actually made a few packs, so I like also know from like the past packs like what worked or what didn't work, and if like something turns out really nice, I like really take the measures and like take the measurements of it and like document it, and then I just kind of like take all those like puzzle pieces together, and then just like paint it on a piece of paper. I think only like usually for the shoulder straps and for the hip for the hip belt I like have like an actual pattern drawn on. For the rest it's just freestyle it. So but I feel like that might have to change in the future, potentially even make a few more packs.
That is seriously impressive, just because most people, like Jameson shaking his head, we're both just like jaws drop, because most people, one, you don't really have a background in, like, you didn't go to school for sewing or product design, and then you're over here like freehanding a backpack. Like
but it might not be the most like efficient approach, to be honest. I just like couldn't get myself to do it any differently yet.
I could talk about your backpack forever, frankly, and just DIY backpacks in general, but I know we have a timeline. So I want to move to your tent, because that's one thing for me that's still really intimidating. Like I would consider myself very adventurous. I make a lot of stuff. I love like different things up here, and like I love to test out different ideas, but a shelter is one of those things that I don't really want to try even. Like there's not really a piece of me that's just really interested in that. So I would really like to dig into how you did that and why you did that, and then a little bit about your design and stuff. But first off, how scared were you when you started this? Or did you have any hesitation about jumping into this?
Yeah, I mean, for the tent, it was definitely like terrified, just like placing the like fabric order.
Good.
And
That's good to know,
I
because
remember how much it was. But it was a lot of money, even with like the adventure sponsorship. It was still a lot of money.
I'm so glad, because if you didn't have any hesitation, I might have had more questions for you. So I'm glad that you were a little bit worried about it too.
Yeah, it was definitely intimidating.
So what was the design? Tell us about, just give us kind of the brief overview of your shelter.
Yeah, so what is that? So yeah, I wanted to make a single, like one person, single wall Cuban fiber tent. And I mean, I think generally why I had like confidence in like DIY shelters is because when I hiked throughout the PCT, I was hiking with a Swedish guy who actually brought his own like pyramid style shelter that he made himself. So it's like a new, like, okay, if you like make your own shelter, it can actually survive a true hike. So, you know, like, because before I'm like never would have like thought of like taking, you know, like your homemade gear on like such a long adventure. So that kind of like gave me the confidence, like, okay, it can work. And then, yeah, so, but I never really like owned a Cuban fiber like shelter before. I mean, again, in Europe, it's even less of a thing. I think there's like 0 companies that make Cuban fiber tents here. So yeah, and I never like worked with Cuban fiber before either. I think I tried to like make one dry bag as a test, to even like see like what this material is about and how this like bonding and gluing stuff works and all that, and like how thick it is, because I really had no like feeling for it. But it's like, yeah, for like still nylon and stuff, I kind of like, I mean, I've used tents before, so I know what it is like. And yeah, I wanted a single person tent that sets up with trekking poles. I had made like a tunnel 1-person tent, very much based on like the Tarp Tent moment. So it has those like carbon struts, triangles at the end, which is like a great way to increase the space inside a tent. And then yeah, in the center I had like 1 pole, so I kind of like took that and wanted to make like a trekking pole version of that and single walled. So I think it's very much based on another Tarp Tent, because Tarp Tent designs are great. The Tarp Tent notch with the like 2 peaks, 2 poles, 1 like ridge in the center, and then those like carbon triangle strut thingies at the end. Yeah, there was the idea I had.
What was your process for that? Are you also freehanding a tent? Are you just like sitting down and drawing it out on some Dyneema? I mean, I know a little bit about your process because I have been obviously stalking your Instagram since then, and have watched all of your stories and not missed a beat. But tell us a little bit about the initial process for this tent, how you went through the patterning and beyond.
Yeah, so I mean, in the beginning, I didn't even know I was going to make one thing that looks like the notch. I just wanted like a single person tent that's like single walled and probably as light as possible. I wanted like to have a really small footprint, but still like make it usable in like, yeah, alpine conditions. I wanted as like little stakes as possible as well, because often you have like really rocky terrain and it's really hard to like get stakes in the ground. So I wanted to like make it freestanding with as like few stakes as possible. So yeah, what I did was to first like go onto like SketchUp, which is like this 3D painting, I don't know what you call it, 3D model software. I had no idea how it worked, so it took a bit of time to like figure that out.
And that's a type of software that you had access to design this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a free not open source, but there's like a free version of it. Okay. You can just like model it online, yeah. And my sister is an architect, so I was kind of, like in the beginning I like asked her if she can like has got some ideas, but I think by the time she like actually like was ready to help me, I'd already like figured it out myself. But yeah, again, it was probably not like the most efficient or professional way, but it just like was one way that worked for me. And yeah, I like went to like a bunch of different designs. First I tried like pyramid style tents with like 1 pole, and yeah, then I always like made one design on like the 3D software, and then try to kind of get the patterns for the different panels, like get the rough dimensions. Then I bought some like builder's tarp, just like this, I don't know what you call it in English, just like really cheap big tarps you can like get in a hardware store. And I tried to make like a prototype out of them. And yeah, like the first few prototypes were like an absolute nightmare. Like I couldn't even pitch them. Like they were just like, that was horrible. I think it was really hard to also figure out like, you know, like the thing with the catenary curves, which is like those curves you usually implement to like make it more stable and like make it less saggy. And yeah, it was really hard to like even get used to that and like understand like what's happening. So I was like, oh, this looks a bit saggy. So like edit a curve, and then like it just didn't work at all anymore. It's like, oh wait, so what just happened? So I went through like, I don't know, I think it was like 4 or 5 like tarp prototypes in the beginning until I kind of like settled roughly on one design. And then yeah, like when I was like pretty much settled on the design, I actually like had the pattern like printed out by like professional printing service, because you have those like really big pattern pieces that I can't just print at home. And then from that, I like made one last prototype from tarp. I was like, okay, I think that looks like reasonable enough. I think I could try to make that from human fiber now. And that's when I placed that order, but was still terrified that everything's gonna go wrong. Oh yeah, and one other thing I wanted to do was to like keep the like surface as small as possible, because human fiber is so freaking expensive. So because I was looking at something like the Pro Trail from Tarp Tent. I know it's like a A-frame style shelter, but actually would have like cost, oh, I think almost $100 more just for the material cost, because it just like uses more fabric. So also I was like trying to like minimize the amount of fabric it uses.
Yeah,
So
I actually have the old version of that tent that you're mentioning, the Tarp Tent,
yeah.
and it's a mammoth. It's a big tent, it has a big footprint. So I definitely see what you're saying about that. But you definitely, I mean, you're female. I don't know how tall you are specifically, but I think you're not like those tents specifically. The Tarp tents are made for someone who is like 6'5". So I don't think you were battling any like height issues there, but you were definitely smart to try to make the tent as small and usable as possible for yourself. So yeah. So you said you had 4 to 5 prototypes for your tent. Is this something where you're each time making a new tent, or are you again ripping those stitches out with your seam ripper and just?
No, it was definitely like just making it completely new, because it was, I mean, okay. I think one I like took apart a little bit, or sometimes it's like I made like small adjustment in one model, but then often it was like, okay, no, this model is like big shit, and I gotta start over again. So it was
clearly
really just like stitching like the whole idea and then like starting over again from not from zero, but from the start.
And you mentioned obviously you weren't prototyping with Dyneema because that would be exorbitant. But you said you did most of your prototypes with just like one of those cheap tarps so you can get at like any general store. I think I know what you're talking about, like kind of like the blue, you know, you just go to the like Walmart or Superstore. Yeah. So you just like would do it over and over with the same material. Did you stick to that tarp material, or did you kind of play around with prototyping with different materials?
No, I stuck to that because I mean I knew like, yeah, unlike like the steel nylon I used in the tent before, like I knew that like human fiber is not really elastic or anything, so like it has fairly similar properties and it's a bit like stiff, rigid-ish, which the human fiber is as well. So I figured it's actually pretty reasonable. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's like much thicker and like much more like sturdy, but I think overall like the properties are kind of similar. And yeah, it was really just like the cheapest material I could find, even just making like 5. I was thinking about making it from Tyvek, the prototypes, but like making 5 10 like real size Tyvek tents is also freaking expensive, so like ditch that idea.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but we did just, I know you saw it, we did just bring on Tyvek by the yard, and it's $3. So if anyone is curious about prototyping your own tent 4 to 5 times, you can check out the new Tyvek that we sell. So what material did you end up, what weight of Dyneema did you end up going for your shelter?
Yeah, so initially, I mean, I did like my one test try bag that I made. I used like 0.5 ounce human fiber, which is what like most people use for the tents. And I like made a dry bag, and I know it's not a typical dry bag material, but I just like looked at it and it's like, I feel like I can't really, I mean, I know I should be able to trust it, but I just like, I had trust issues, let's say. It's like really, really thin. Like I couldn't get myself to like fully, you know, trust my life and well-being into like thin fabric. And I also like knew I wanted it to be like longer lasting, which, yeah, I know, I mean, like it's probably fine, like the 0.5 ounce cube fiber, but for like the, you know, if I like still want to use this tent in like 3-4 years and like use it a lot, then it probably wouldn't survive as long. I know that like the thinner like human fiber shelter is usually like after one true hike or the equal amount of use of one true hike, they're usually done, because they like get the little pinholes and stuff in them. So like I went for the 0.8 ounce cube fiber, and I'm very happy with the choice, because I think in the end it added only, what was it, like 80 grams, which is just under 3 ounces or 2.5 ounces or whatever, to the weight, but it you know, it feels like a strong and solid tent now. So
awesome. So you did the 0.8 Dyneema for the entire shelter. That is the floor and also the walls.
For the floor, I used the 1 ounce. I think, yeah, the 1 ounce Dyneema.
What is the general perspective on Dyneema composite fabrics out there? Because like what you were saying, if I remember correctly, is that not a lot of companies are using or making DCF shelters in Europe. Were you introduced to DCF in America? Are you super familiar with it? Do you see a lot of DCF stuff? Because like in America, we see a lot of like hyper light mountain gear and Z-packs, and a lot of ultralight companies use DCF, and it's very, very popular. A lot of tent companies like Tarp Tent and Hyperlight and Z-packs, you know, other people. What's the industry like around DCF in Europe?
I feel like it's basically non-existent. I mean, it's used, I know, in like some, you know, like climbing ropes and like climbing equipment. So I know some people from climbing and mountaineering, they like heard the term before, but I think there's no tents or backpacks or anything made from Dyneema. So yeah, I've only like heard of it because I true hiked in the US and got to know all the like ultralight stuff. And I mean, yeah, I think there's no companies that make cube fiber tents, at least. I don't know, maybe there's some like really, really tiny ones, but I think I couldn't really name any right now. So like all the stuff you can buy here, you like have to import from the US, and it's freaking expensive. I mean, otherwise I probably would have even like, I feel like if I would have lived in the US, I would have just like bought a Tarp Tent and be happy with it.
Yeah.
Like here, it's like actually way, way, way more expensive than it is in the US. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to like try to make my own.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I wonder why it is. Are there questions or are there concerns that users have there? Because like I know I've read some things about people hiking, I think it's in the Alps, maybe it's in the Dolomites, where they are hesitant about DCF because of the amount of time that they're on rock and, you know, abrasion resistance and stuff like that. But for a lot of other people, there's a lot of parts of Europe that are not just covered in rocks. You know, a lot of people could use it very much, you know, the same as we do here. Do you know why there's those questions?
I think it's generally, I mean, everything is a lot more like conservative in like terms of gear. I mean, just ultralight hiking is not a thing, so this like super like weight conscious thinking really is not like probably it's not super common. So like, I mean, everyone just has their like hillback tents, and you know, they're fine, but they're also like complete overkill for, I feel like 95% of all situations. But I mean, if you like, if you want to buy a tent, you buy a hillback tent. I think I've seen like Big Agnes so a few times, and like the MSR tents are like getting more and more popular, but they're still like a bit of a like niche thingy. So you still have to like, oh god, like this is like an ultralight thing, and you know, like it really helps you because you're not carrying like 6 pounds of tent on your backpack. Maybe you should try that. But yeah, I think it's just, I mean, one thing is definitely the conditions. I mean, often a lot of hiking Europeans do is in like Scotland or Scandinavia or whatever, where it is pretty, like it's always super wet, it's always super windy. So it's really not the conditions where you want to use like the ultralight, like single wall tent. But I mean, like, and you don't really get the conditions like on the, you know, the PCT, it's mostly dry, except in Washington. So you really can get away with like lighter gear, easier. And yeah, I mean, in the Alps, it's different because it's really high and exposed. So if you have like good weather, great. I mean, ultralight gear is perfect for that. But it also, you know, you're like up in really high mountains and they're pretty exposed. So you can like get super rapid changes in weather. So you have like way more often. You have like intense thunderstorms and all that stuff. And in the summer, if you're in the Alps, so you have like thunderstorms basically every day with like, you know, hail and stuff. And it is really rocky, and you like, yeah, there's no like campsites, or it's not as much like open space. You're often like confined to like smaller, more sketchy like tent sites. So yeah, it is a bit hard on the gear for sure. So I think that might play a role. But I think one big piece is just, yeah, it's just, I don't know, it just hasn't arrived here yet.
Yeah. So
Living behind the moon. Yeah.
that begs the question, I think, how did your tent hold up over your trip?
It held up great. I had, I guess, half of the time maybe it was raining, but it was perfectly fine. I had some like pretty windy conditions, held up fine. So I think all the like prototyping and yeah, really like knowing what I like want the shelter to be like definitely paid off. So I'm more than happy. Yeah.
Something that continues to amaze me about DIY and your own gear is, despite I think a lot of people have a fear whenever they make something that it's not going to work, that it's going to be a catastrophic failure. You're going to be in the mountains, you're going to get like hailed on, you're going to die of hypothermia because your gear failed you. And I don't honestly know of any of those stories. I'm not saying that people haven't had catastrophic failures with their gear, but I think if you do a lot of research and you work really hard and you prototype, I think that our gear fails us a lot less than we even ever imagine. And I think that's one of the great pros of making your own gear. If you do have hesitations, totally do your research, try to ease those fears for you, but there's a really low chance it's actually going to fail you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one thing, because you really like know like what your gear can do as well. You know the limits, and you like know what conditions you're taking it into pretty well. Whereas like if you just buy something from like a company and it's like, okay, so I've got a tent now, I can take it to the mountains, and then it like rips apart in like a storm and it was way too much for it to handle. Like, yeah, I mean, you get like gear failures from like many like professionally made gear as well, because often people just don't really like know what they can like put on the gear and what they can't. Whereas like if you make your own gear, you really like know like, okay, this is what it's good for. And especially if it breaks, like I really know how to fix it and like what the issue is, or like just all those small things. I know like my gear inside out, which at least for me like really makes a big difference.
I have a few questions about your tent real quick. You did mention that it was non-freestanding, so it's supported and pitched by trekking poles. And I know in comparison to the Z-Pac's tent, which is also the same, supported by trekking poles, a lot of people's gripe with that is that it has like 18 tie outs. How many tie outs did your tent have? And then following on to that, you mentioned it rained half the time. So what was your waterproofing method for your DCF shelter?
Yeah, so for the pegs, yeah, really one of my like goals was to have as little stakeout points as possible, and I ended up with 4 points in the end, which works great. So 4 point for like, I guess for like most of the nights where it's like mildly windy and like reasonable weather. When it gets like more stormy, you can add I think another 4 stakes with like tie out points, and then it's definitely really, really storm proof, at least from my testing so far. So yeah, that was surprisingly good. I thought it would be worse. And yeah, but it's nice if if like rocky campsites or anything, you can just like set it up with 4 rocks and it's fine for really like and a lot of
4 to 8 tent stakes is a lot nicer than 18.
Yeah. And also it's lighter. I mean, that's the thing, like Z-Packs, they are like, they never like add the weight of the stakes to the gear. And it's like, oh, we have this like 400 or like less than like 1 pound 10, but you have like another pound of stakes to carry. Whereas if you like have one that actually gets away with like less stakes, you actually really save quite a lot of weight. But I mean, it's still important to have some like extra like guidelines, and even if you don't like have the stakes for them, you can just like put them in with a rock or whatever. If it goes really bad, you still want to have like all the ways to yeah, stake it out. And the other thing, oh yeah, waterproofing. Yeah, so I just used like the double-sided tape, what it's called. It's double-sided tape.
That's right. It's the Dyneema repair tape,
Yeah.
the 1 inch.
Yeah, exactly. And I just,
Oh
yeah,
no,
I
you're saying you use the double-sided.
yeah. And I just made like my
PSA.
own Cuban fiber tape. So I like, you just take the double-sided tape, tape it onto like
Okay,
a stripe of Dyneema fabric, cut it out. So it's a bit more work, but
perfect.
and
So
then
you made
you
your
have-
own repair tape with
Exactly,
the
yeah.
double-sided PSA. Perfect. I
Yeah.
love that.
and then yeah, you just like glue it onto the, I made like flat felt seams for most of the tent, and then yeah, just like glue it over, even like cut it in half because half an inch was enough, I think, and was cheaper. So really like try to budget very well, and yeah, just like glued it on and really like press it on. I sewed the tent, so I mean, some people just like when they make Cuban fiber shelters, they just like only bond it or like only use the tape, so they like don't sew it, which I don't know, that just sounded a bit terrifying to me. And yeah, and I think the reason why I do it because the stitching can like weaken the material, but since I used the like 0.8 ounce, so like a thicker Cuban fiber,
Yeah,
I figured it's less of an issue, and if you make the like stitches fairly far apart, it should be fine. And yeah, they worked. I mean, that's a nice thing also about Cuban fiber, even if you like accidentally like poke a hole in the tent in the process, which might have happened. Like, you can just like, patch it, like put a sticker or like, yeah, repair tape on it, and it's good.
one thing I'm noticing with you, Leah, is that you've done a ton of research, and I mean, it seems like you've covered all your bases from like stitch length to making your own repair tape and shape and pattern. Where did you go to do your research? Did you know other people have made stuff, or surely you had to find a couple different sources that were really helpful to you? Can you share those sources with other people and other makers that might be interested in doing similar things?
I think mostly just Google things, but I mean, the two websites where you find most of the information is like the MYOG, or even like the ultralight backpacking subreddits. And then I think the other thing that also has a lot of information is Backpacking Light, just like the website and the forums where they especially like for like the really, really technical bits, they're a great source for that.
Yeah, no, those are great. And that's a good plug for both of them, because there's a wealth of knowledge there, and it can be hard to find, but if you know what you're looking for, it's there.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely spent a lot of time like trying to like take through information, and yeah. But
Awesome. So out of these, well, before we move on, you had the shelter and you had the backpack. Was there any other gear that you made for your trips this year?
I think I actually ended up made a merino shirt, although not because you don't yet have merino, but maybe in the future. But yeah, from like basically like the German equivalent of your shop. And I made a fleece, I think, and I made another puffy jacket, which actually turned out much better than the first one. But like just like like a Climate Shield Apex puffy jacket, because I'd already tried to make one last year, and although it was warm and functional, it just looked really horrible. It was a bit embarrassing to wear. So the second one actually looks like a jacket. So I've been using it a lot since. But it was it, I think.
What was harder?
That's awesome.
Was it harder to make clothing, or was it harder to make a tent? Because both of those seem horrible.
I mean, the tent definitely
really
was by far the hardest bit. I mean, it took me ages, and at some point, I got so the floor didn't work out. I got so frustrated that I had to just leave it for a month and then get back to it, because otherwise I probably would never finish it. So yeah, the tent was by far the hardest. I think the backpack is probably the most enjoyable, because you get the most it's just so rewarding, because it's not super easy to make, but fairly easy to make, and you just have a backpack in the end, which is amazing. And for clothing, I mean, just making a merino shirt is pretty easy once you have to cut down. It's really, really simple. Making a puffy jacket was a bit harder, but since it was my second one already, I kind of learned from all the mistakes from the first one, so it was actually a lot easier now to make that. And I just found a pattern for a jacket and that worked, and so it was not too hard to make.
That's awesome. How did the Climate Shield hold up during your trip? You said it rained a lot, but how did the performance of that jacket play out for you?
Yeah, I loved it because I so far I've only used like down jackets, and it's always the thing, like if it just like starts to drizzle a little bit and it's cold, it's like, oh no, but I don't want my down jacket to get wet because it's gonna die. And for the Climate Shield one, just like, oh yeah, it's just drizzling a bit, like who cares? So yeah, it was actually really nice to have like a jacket that's like not as sensitive as a down jacket. So yeah, absolutely love it. Basically, like I wear it as my everyday jacket now, so it's great.
Is there
That's awesome.
is there one story or one moment that sticks out to you from your trip or your trips about your gear where you're like, oh man, I'm so glad I made this, or I'm so glad I added this feature? There's one moment where you're like, ah, this is what making your own gear is all about.
I think mostly it's just when like people look at my backpack, because it looks, I mean, it has like this special printed pattern, so it looks quite a bit like different than like most other backpacks. I mean, I love the design of it, but it's definitely a bit like special. So like, yeah, people like giving me like weird looks for like this like rather unusual like type of gear, but then like seeing like how it performs. And so like, especially like, I mean, it's mostly waterproof and all that stuff, so like they like see that it like works great, and that's
Yeah.
like a kind of, you know, moments like.
Not to
That's pretty
backtrack too much, but we didn't touch on the type of fabric that you used for your backpack and what you printed that on. So if you want to share a little bit about that, and then maybe your experience of working with that fabric, and then how just kind of like your review of how you felt like it performed for you as a backpack fabric.
Yep. So I used for the printed panels, I've used X-PAC V21 Ripstop, because like it doesn't have like the big like X patterns, and yeah, so like the print actually looks like really, 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 really nice on it. I'm still like, I look at this backpack every time, I'm like, wow, this print looks so cool. And I mean, I've used it for almost half a year now, and I'm using it quite a lot, and like it looks as good as new, and absolutely impressed with it. So I love this fabric, and I love working with it. So like, yeah, X-PAC is like super nice to work with. It's like just the perfect amount of like being like rigid and not super slippery. So it's a dream. I'll definitely recommend that. Yeah, and for the like mesh pockets, I've used like Ripstop, Dyneema reinforced Ripstop mesh stuff, and that's also great because I mean, it's always the first thing that breaks on a backpack is the mesh. So like I would never use like normal mesh on a backpack because it always, I mean, it breaks like, you know, it breaks, and then the backpack still can go for like another 2 years. But you like have broken mesh pockets. So like, you know, if you like use the X-PAC, which is like a super durable fabric, you also want to use like durable mesh, because otherwise it just doesn't make sense. So either make like everything from super flimsy lightweight materials, or make everything super sturdy, but like don't mix them, because that's so yeah, like those two fabrics, I think those are like the main two fabrics that I used, and yeah, worked great. I mean, absolutely love them. I think never going back to anything else.
Thanks for sharing
Actually,
that.
I discovered there's apparently like a recycling based version of X-PAC, which is called EcoPack, which I like saw some shop in Europe had recently, which is like, I think it just worked with it for like one backpack now, and it feels exactly pretty much the same. I mean, I'm not an expert on like all the technical things. It feels the same, it looks the same, but yeah, it's like based for like I think 90% recycled materials. So I feel like that would be like the next upgrade if like X-PAC can, you know, like get their recycled materials in. But
I'm gonna speak in code here, but there are future versions of X-PAC that will utilize recycled material as well.
awesome. That's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Great.
I do think it's a big initiative for a lot of the manufacturers of these textiles, DSM specifically, and also specifically Dimension Polyant, who produces X-PAC, that it is a big initiative, obviously, to go green for any industry, and the fabric industry is one that it takes a little more time, because you're making they're making these things from scratch. Like they're designing a whole new fabric. But I do know from the people that we've talked to that with both of those manufacturers specifically, that's going to be a huge push for 2022. So just here in a few months. So I am excited for that because I know everyone just jumps at all of that recycled material. If you're backpacking, you're already eco-conscious. If you're a scientist studying glaciers, like you're trying to save the world, you want your eco fabric. So we
and then like your recycled backpack. I mean, that's the coolest feeling, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is awesome. So we don't have many questions left, but out of all of the projects you completed, which I know took you a majority of the year because you were working on them constantly, what is one thing you would maybe do differently or change, specifically or generally, however you want to take that question?
I think one thing is definitely get better at like making my patterns beforehand, which I think the backpack would have like benefited from. Learn to like, I don't know, like all those like skills of how to like make gear that actually like fits on your body, because that's something that I find quite hard. I mean, making one tent is one thing, but like making something that like fits your body is another thing, as we talked about. So yeah, that's something I really wish I would have like put more time in beforehand, because I feel like it might have the results.
Well, I also feel like
more efficient.
I would have given up after seam ripping half of my backpack, and then I would have just thrown it in the trash and been like, I hate this. So the fact that you did it so many times and you're still so optimistic about the whole process, but I love that you're like, one thing I'm not going to do again is rip those seams apart 5 times, but I will get better at making patterns. So
I mean, it just takes a lot of like work to like actually like get better at this patterning. So like it's like, okay, I guess I'm gonna invest the time like ripping my seams apart. Am I gonna invest the time like learning the skill? I probably should have invested it to learn that skill. More sustainable.
Well, it seems like you have many more backpacks and many more projects in your future. So I'm excited to see those and see what you come up with, because your designs have been super rad and very exciting to watch, and your process has been awesome. So we're really glad that we chose you as one of our adventure sponsors. And I mean, we don't give grades out for adventure sponsors because it's just about the process, but you totally crushed it and we're really happy.
Well, thank you guys. Yeah, thanks for giving me the adventure sponsorship. Otherwise, I never would have like dared to make a Cuban fiber tent, for example. So mission accomplished. Yeah, well, definitely like, super happy that it worked out and the results great.
Yeah, well, thank you too for being so open about your process. Obviously, we didn't make you share all those things on Instagram and stuff, but I know that a lot of obviously part of my job as social media is, browsing Reddit and all these forums and Instagram and Facebook. And I know that you are a pretty important person in the community, and I know that a lot of people look towards you. I know it's probably weird for me to say that because you're like, I'm just a girl making my own gear, but I know that a lot of people look forward to seeing your stuff, and that you're so helpful when people are commenting and asking questions and giving advice and things like that. So that is what the MYOG community is all about, and you're a really special part of that. And just from what I've seen, and I definitely want to thank you for being that person that is willing to share everything that's going on in this crazy brain of yours.
Well, thank you so much. That's really, really nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Your hard work has not gone unnoticed. I know a lot of people aspire to be doing and making those things that you are. And I hope that people listening can get an ounce of confidence from all the information that you've given, and kind of help motivate someone that they don't need the Singer HD machine, that they can go get $100 30-year, I don't want to say clunker, but like the antiquer from Craigslist, and then that you put in the hard work and the research, and that has paid off. It's about persistence and not giving up, and that clearly shows through every
And learning how to make
iteration.
patterns beforehand.
Yes, well, it's all a process, but yeah, you've definitely put in the time and the hard work, and it definitely shows and pays off. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to the next project as well, and see where this is gonna lead.
I have one last question that I forgot to mention earlier. How is your adventure buddy? I'm not remembering his name right now, but you brought
My elephant.
Yes.
Yes. Eddie is his name. Yeah, he's doing absolutely great. And yeah, for those who might not have thought it, yeah, I've got this like stuffed animal elephant. That's kind of like my mascot or adventure buddy, whatever. And I even like for fun like designed a little like tags to like that I put in my gear, which has like, because his name is Eddie and he loves cookies. So I like has like it's like face on it, and it's just like the ultralight cookie. And so that's what I mean. It's not an official brand or anything, but yeah. So he's very proud to like have his face on like all my gear that I've been making.
I love that so much.
Eddie needs his own mini custom pack if you have any leftover scraps and a rainy Sunday. That'd be pretty.
He's already got his like own merino shirt, so like yeah, the backpack is
that's awesome. Oh, that's so amazing. I feel like we would have been remiss if we didn't bring Eddie into this conversation at all.
Yeah, he's
part of that.
He'll really appreciate that too. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that was my last question. Thank you for spending so much time with us, Leah, and for sharing all these things, just for sharing everything. We really enjoyed your process.
Thank you.
And then finally, where can people follow you and your past and future adventures?
Yeah, mostly on my Instagram when I'm not too lazy to post anything, which is Leah Hikes.
And it's Lea.
Yeah, it's yeah. Leah without an H, but Hikes with an H.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Leah, for taking the time to join us all the way from Switzerland, correct?
Yep. Yeah.
Perfect. And yeah, for being one of our adventure sponsors, and again, for also being such a helpful and informative part of the MYOG community. We greatly appreciate you. And I know that all the other makers out there do as well.
Thank you.
Bye, Leah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.